Everyone, and welcome to the good morning to the welcome to the applicant briefing for the SuRV Scale Up Readiness Validation competition as part of the ATF portfolio. So, quick look at the agenda. If I could have the third slide, please, Rachel. That's great. So I'll shortly hand over to Julian from APC, who'll do a welcome and introduction to the ATF. I'll then move into the main part of my presentation, which covers the competition scope and timelines. We'll then have Rachel from Innovate UK delivering a presentation on the competition applications process. And then with a good section at the end for Q&A. And being a new competition, you may well wish to make good use of that time. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Julian to do the introduction.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SuRV competition briefing. Just a little bit of an overview from myself around the Automotive Transformation Fund and its aims and objectives. Many of you will be familiar with the fact that the fund was launched in the middle of 2020 with the aims of securing the transformation towards electrification and decarbonisation of the UK's automotive sector at scale and at pace, helping that we retain our technological leadership position throughout this transformation and supporting the current strong export performance, where we have, as many of you know, a very strong overexposure, if you like, to internal combustion engine and supported driveline technologies. And of course, this plays very neatly into our green recovery post the COVID-19 crisis. So just turning to the next slide, looking at the technology focus for the ATF, it's really supporting the upstream supply chain for electrification technologies, principally around batteries, electric machines, power electronics and fuel cells, and crucially, the upstream supply chain for those components as well. It is not oriented towards vehicle assembly or manufacturing facilities themselves. It's really on focusing on those upstream supply chain elements. Of course, where vehicle manufacturers choose to vertically integrate the manufacture of these systems in-house, then that does fall within scope. But I want to just reinforce that this is about the extended supply chain, which can reach right the way through to minerals extraction and processing, because we're very conscious that to make the industry competitive in the long term and sustainable in the long term in the UK, we need to ensure that we have resilient, reliable, cost competitive materials supply chain, which also has good provenance and that we have no materials of concerning origin being used. So just moving to the next slide, we can provide support through the ATF through a number of funding streams. Now, the bulk of the £850 million that has been released so far by government is around capital investment. And this is targeted at the principal aims, which is industrialising at scale through capital investment in the UK in those key technology commodity areas. Now, associated with that capital investment, which could be for land and buildings and process equipment, for example, we also have an element of R&D funding. And we've used that R&D funding earlier on in the programme through the feasibility studies to allow companies and consortia to develop assessments about the technical or economic viability of investing in the UK. And those first 3 rounds have now run their course. Several of the projects have now concluded and the feasibility study 3 competition has now closed and has been awarded and those projects are now running. We're also now running the Scale Up Readiness Validation Programme, and Andy will talk a little bit more about that. But we recognise that associated with capital investment projects, there are often requirements to have some enduring R&D to maintain the operating effectiveness of those capital investments. So that is a part of the funding stream for ATF as well. Now, specifically, where does this sit in terms of technology readiness level? So if we just turn to the next slide, this is quite helpful orientation to look at where we sit with the APC and ATF programs specifically. Now, if you look at the sort of cross-sector technology box down the bottom, of course, with battery-specific technologies, energy storage, you've got the Faraday Battery Challenge, which tends to start in earlier stage and goes up to middle of the application readiness phase. We have something a little similar with the Driving the Electric Revolution Challenge, and of course for digital technologies we've got Made Smarter and Brunel in the same sort of space. But APC's activity really picks up in the middle of the sort of technology readiness development scale, and Automotive Transformation Fund really focuses on getting towards the later end and getting to industrialization at scale. Now, what we're hoping we will achieve with the Scale-up Readiness Validation Programme is satisfying what has been self-evidently a need from industry to demonstrate that technologies can work at scale to help unlock later at scale investment in industrialization. So, for example, pilot line plus kind of scale, demonstrating that things work beyond lab scale, so that you can then go forward with more extensive investment projects. So that's where it sits, where we're looking for significant physical products to help address questions such as technical validation for adoption by downstream customers, and demonstrating also that the process technology is ready to scale up to support competitive manufacturing at scale. So on that note, I shall hand back to Andy, who will take you through a little bit more detail about the scope and the timelines associated with this competition.
Thanks, Julian. Right, let's take a look at this new competition for ATF, which is SuRV. So hopefully you're all aware of the general objectives, but in summary, this is all about supporting you and demonstrating that your scheme is ready for scale up to potential investors. In fact, the target outcome is that you go on to successfully secure all of the funding you need to industrialise your scheme. So here's an overview of the timing. And as you can see, SuRV has quite a compact and deliberately fast-paced awards process. This is all about meeting industry need right now. Similarly, you'll find stringent requirements in terms of pace for the project itself, which we'll come to later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So here is some information on what SuRV is and does. There's an awful lot on here, but you'll be able to review these points in detail, both through the Innovate UK IFS system and also in the online video, but I'll just pick out some of the really important points. As you can see, projects have key start and completion times as well as duration. In addition, an important pass-fail criteria will be the ability to spend 50% of the grant by 31st of March 2023. The assessors will be looking for strong evidence and credibility around this point. Aside from this, the project should contribute to the overall aims of the ATF, as shown in the lower bullets. Next slide, please. Moving on then, here are some useful examples of where SuRV can help. You might be re-engineering existing processes as a route to higher volume. You might need to validate processes to resolve supply chain issues and bring work back onshore. SuRV might help resolve process or product issues that you've encountered during previous industrialization projects. It may support either key individual processes or steps in the manufacturing or a complete end-to-end process. Next slide, please. SuRV reflects the latest ATF prioritisations at the time of publishing, and these have evolved over time, so please make sure you consider your proposal alongside these key themes. More information is available on Innovate's IFS system. Next slide, please. And now some of the projects we won't fund. Please be clear on these, as we still see a large number of applications, particularly around things like charging infrastructure, and these should be directed to other funding sources. Cross-sectorial mobility for technology is attractive, but automotive must be the main beneficiary. Fossil fuels and their engines are very much out of scope. ATF is targeting zero tailpipe CO2 now. Digital or data technologies can be used as a tool in delivering an in-scope outcome, but cannot be the sole focus of the project. Larger 2- and 3-wheel applications are in scope, but micromobility applications such as e-bikes or e-scooters are out of scope. Just remember too that you cannot specify a dependency on either domestic products or exports as being key to success for your proposal. Next slide, please. So the application structure should be familiar to those who've engaged with other APC programs, beginning with the project details, then the application questions, and finally the financial questions. So into question 1, business opportunity, and this is intentionally placed front and centre in the technical questions. Here we're looking for a clear description, evidence in your understanding of the opportunity and how you'll engage it. Evidence of a level of progress made to date is really important here. Next slide, please. And question 3, we move on to scale and pace, a key theme for the ATF, which centres around driving a rapid but long-lasting transition for UK automotive. Tell us what changes you'll make as a result of SuRV funding and give scale to this. Explain the timelines and any risks, but similarly, any opportunities that exist to accelerate this. Next slide, please. Now on to technology. This is a very important question and you need to make the assessors really feel enthusiastic about your proposal. Compare your proposal both before and after the SuRV project with the best in class on the UK and global stage. Explain the deliverables and how they fit with your ongoing plans to engage this opportunity. We need to see a detailed and credible project plan with work breakdown structure and work packages that we can link to the costs, as well as discussion on IP, both foreground and background. Next, we ask you about trade and competitiveness. Tell us more about the market opportunity and how SuRV will help you engage it. How will your forecast outcomes improve as a result? Evidence your customer interest and show how SuRV makes both you and the UK more competitive. Question 6 deals with the last of the ATF strategic categories, speed and sustainability of benefits. Here we want to understand your overall strategy and where the SuRV project sits on this. The funding should accelerate delivery of your strategic milestones. Dissemination is a key topic. Tell us how the knowledge or other improvements won through the SuRV project will benefit not only the partner organisations but the wider industry beyond. Finally, when will the benefits be realised and do you see any options to accelerate this? Next slide, please. Thank you. Question 7, here we come to the topic of risk. We're looking to understand not only the risks to the project itself, but to the overall success of the scheme beyond the project, set against your detailed understanding of the broader context. What are the risks around attracting further funding, even with the outcomes of the SuRV project? How will you mitigate these through the project and beyond? This is the point where you upload your risk register. Make sure you give this ample attention. It's not a box ticking exercise. It's an integral part of you demonstrating your organisations and the project's credibility. Ensure it's developed by someone who is experienced in risk management. And lastly, we arrive at the cost question. Aside from the more obvious points of stating your eligible costs and the grant you're seeking against them, tell us how your share will be financed. We're looking for evidence of secure funding sources. These must be suitable and appropriate for public match funding. Split this down across the partners and by cost category and link the costs to your work packages in your project plan. Okay, so hopefully we have a good feel now for the scope of the SuRV competition. We appreciate this is a new competition, which is addressing quite a specific industry need. Therefore, please feel free to ask any questions at all using the chat or during the Q&A session at the end. I'll now hand over to Rachel Evans from Innovate UK, who will take us through the application process. Rachel.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy and Julian, for that really lovely introduction to the competition. So now I'm going to run you through everything to do with the IFS system and anything that you'll need to know when you're coming to submit your application. So firstly, this competition does allow you to submit a previously submitted application. Now, a previously submitted application is an application Innovate UK judges as not materially different from one you have submitted before, but it can be updated based on the assessor's feedback. Something that we would see as not a previously submitted application is a brand new application, project or idea that you have not previously submitted into an Innovate UK competition. or it's a previously submitted or ineligible application which has been updated based on assessor feedback. It is also materially different from the application submitted before, and it also fits with the new scope of this competition. So on the screen here, you can see the types of organisations that Innovate UK funds. Applying to this competition, the lead partner needs to be a UK registered business of any size. We then have research organisations, so either universities or one of these other categories. And then we have the public sector organisations and charities. So the amount of funding you can receive will depend on which of these categories you fit into, and further information is available on our website in the general guidance. So on the 1st of January 2021, the UK left the EU and is no longer subject to EU laws on state aid. On this slide, you can see a link to the guidance issued by BEIS. If you're unsure of whether you are eligible to receive a subsidy, please seek legal advice. Further information is available on our website, and you can also contact our customer support services team if you have any questions. A going concern is a business that is assumed will meet its financial obligations when they fall due. It functions without the threat of liquidation for the foreseeable future. You should make sure that your organisation is eligible before you submit an application. If you are unsure of whether you are eligible to receive subsidy control, again, please seek independent legal advice before applying. We do have further information available on our website, and you can also contact our support team if you have any questions. If you're an applicant who is conducting activities that will affect trade of goods and/or electricity between Northern Ireland and the EU, as envisaged by Article 10 of the Northern Ireland Protocol, then you must apply under European Commission state aid rules. In order to be eligible to receive state aid, you must pass the undertakings in difficulty test. This only applies to limited liability companies that are more than 3 years old. If you have a parent company, the test can be performed on your parent or holding company. If you're successful in the competition, we will apply this test as part of our viability checks. If you're unsure of whether you're eligible to receive state aid, again, we would ask you to seek legal advice before applying. We would like to remind you that further information is available on our website, and we also have our customer support team, as mentioned before. So this competition covers industrial research and experimental development projects. So for industrial research projects, you could get funding for up to 70% if you're a micro or small organisation, up to 60% if you're a medium-sized organisation, and up to 50% if you're large. For experimental development projects, it's up to 45% if you're micro or small, 35% if you're medium, or 25% if you're large. For research organisations conducting fundamental research, you could get funding for your eligible project costs of up to 30%. Please remember that at least 70% of total eligible project costs must be incurred by a business. If you have an academic or RTO in your consortium, the maximum level of project cost is 30%. If there is more than one, they would share the 30% between them. Research organisations are not able to lead in this competition, but may partner in as many applications as they wish. More detail will be covered later in the webinar. So there must be evidence of genuine collaboration. You'll need to explain in your application how all parties will contribute to the project and benefit from the collaboration. If you're making more than one application, a business can be involved up to 3 applications to this competition, but can only be the lead partner in one application. Further information is available via the IFS website. More details on other Innovate UK projects is also available via the IFS, and this slide deck and recording will be shared for more information. So some key dates to bear in mind for this competition are on the slide here. So we have the competition open today on the 20th of April 2022. We're having our briefing event as we speak, and our submission deadline is the 25th of May 2022. Now it's important to note the submission deadline is at 11 AM on the dot. IFS will automatically close, and so at 11:01 applications cannot be submitted. We strongly recommend that you submit your application as early as possible, as traffic will be high on the deadline day. Please contact customer support in good time and in advance of the deadline if you're experiencing any difficulties. The earlier you contact us, the easier it will be for us to assist you in making sure that your application gets submitted on time. We are then aiming to inform applicants of notification on the 24th of June 2022. So a little bit more about the IFS Innovation Funding Service. So on the screen here, you can see how the competition will look when you search for it. So when you click apply on the competition webpage, you will be directed here. Use the keyword search to find the competition you are interested in and click the title. It then opens the competition, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide deck. Click the competition to see the tabbed view of the eligibility criteria, scope, key dates, and information on how to apply. When you are happy to apply, simply click the Start New Application button, again shown on the right-hand side of this slide. To apply for a competition, the lead applicant will need to create an account. If you've applied for previous competitions on IFS, you can simply sign in. If you have forgotten your password, please click the Need Help Signing In or Creating an Account drop-down. This will then bring up a Forgotten Your Password link. You can use Companies House to look up and search for your organisation to save typing in the name and address. If you're not on Companies House, you can manually enter your information. We advise that research organisations, academics and unis manually enter your information so that you're not listed as a business on IFS, and this will ensure you receive the correct funding level. So a slight overview on the first section, which covers all the project details. So the first thing you'll fill in is the application details section. So please make sure your research category is correct, as this is used to calculate your grant value. The lead applicant will need to complete this. You'll then have to complete the subsidy basis question. So you'll need to list where the partners in your project are based. This is not applicable for any academic partners, but all other partners in your consortium will need to answer this question. You'll then be directed to the link to complete our EDI survey, and we'll ask you to fill in the project summary. So this is to highlight the need or challenge, approach and innovation, and the outcomes, key to setting the scene for our assessors, as it gives them an overview of your vision. We would then like you to add a public description, which will be published if your project is successful. So please be aware of confidentiality here. And then finally, we'll ask you to fill in the scope. So it's important that your project is within scope to receive funding. Please use this field to justify how your project fits the scope for assessors. If you're unsure as to whether or not your application is in scope for this competition, please do contact customer support service before starting your application. So section 2 covers the questions. Andy ran through them in more detail at the start of this presentation. There's also key guidance and more information available to you via the IFS system. So now I'm just going to run you briefly through some of the application finances. So it's important to note that your business does not have to be UK registered with Companies House when you apply, but it must be registered before you can receive any funding. You are also unable to claim funding if you're an overseas organisation. This would mean your company number begins with FC. Your organisation is set up as a branch, so your company number would begin with BR. Or if you're a collaboration with no formal structure of ownership or control, so your company number begins with ML. This is also applicable if you're a Crown dependency. So if your company is based in Jersey, your company number would begin with JE. If your company is based in Guernsey, or if your company is based in the Isle of Man. You are also unable to claim funding if your company is based in any of the British overseas territories listed on the screen here. Again, there is more information on the IFS system, and if you have any queries regarding this, please contact our customer support service team. So once you've filled in the key information at the start of the application and ran through the questions, you'll then be able to submit your costs. So the first cost you'll be able to submit are your labour costs. So we'll need you to enter the role within the project, gross annual salary, the number of staff and the days to be spent on the project. It will then automatically calculate the total costs. If you have multiple people in the same role on the same average salary, enter this within the role within project field. If an employee is part-time, you should enter their costs as full-time equivalent. You can adjust the working days per year from the default if this is different for your project. And please note that dividends, bonuses and non-productive time cannot be included within your labour costs as they are ineligible. When making grant claims against labour costs, actual cost claims must be supported with timesheets. So we define overheads as additional costs and operational expenses incurred directly as a result of the project. These could include additional costs for administrative staff, general IT, rent and utilities. You can select from the 3 options you can see on the screen how you would like your overheads to be calculated. We class indirect overheads as those costs associated with back office functions, such as finance and HR, whose primary function is to support the running of a business. They can only claim a portion of their time and their work needs to be additional to the delivery of the project. Typically, these costs are not directly related to a particular product or service production. Direct overheads are costs associated with staff working directly on the project. For example, laptops, desks, office facilities. We supply a simple form of which you can list out each type of direct overhead together with the methodology basis of apportionment to this particular project. Again, these overheads would not be incurred if the project does not happen. So for the material costs, we would like you to enter and describe what materials you intend to use on the project, the volume and the cost. The materials listed must be project specific. Please provide as much information as possible. For example, just putting consumables at 50,000 does not provide enough detail and you will be required to provide more information from the project finance team if you are successful. Any items which you would usually depreciate as per your company's policy should be listed in capital usage. Materials supplied by associated companies or subcontracted from other consortium members, these must be listed at cost, excluding any profit element or margin. So within the capital equipment usage, you'll need to describe how you're using the equipment, whether it is new or existing, the new purchase cost, how long you are depreciating it over, and the residual value at the end. These calculations will need to be in line with your accounting practices. If this cost is going to be significant, then you will need to justify who, why, and what you need them for, both here and in your application. It's important that you justify the use of subcontractors within your application, especially those that are non-UK based. As the assessors do not see this level of financial detail, they only see the total costs. If you use a parent or sister company, please ensure that you list at cost and do not include profit. Moving on to travel and subsistence, here you would include things such as any essential meetings that you need to happen during the project. You cannot include any sales and marketing activity as this is ineligible. Travel costs must be economy travel only, and you should be prepared to provide a breakdown of these costs if the project finance reviewer asks for more detail. For example, they might require you to split a trip into its subsistence, accommodation, and travel components separately. So within the other costs sections, please check the finance guide for what costs can be included here. If you're unsure, please do not hesitate to contact customer support. Any other costs which don't fit the previous categories, for example, training directly attributable to the project, licensing new technologies, and patent filing costs for new IP. Please ensure there is no double counting and all costs are justified. As I previously mentioned, the level of funding awarded will depend upon the type of organisation and the type of research being undertaken in the project. IFS will calculate your grant percentage based on the answers inputted. As a reminder, the amount of funding you are eligible to receive is dependent on your organisation type. Within the table here, you can see the breakdown of those percentages based on your organisation type and size. So we're going to run through a little bit about academic partners. So academic partners in your consortium will need to complete a JES form, which they should be familiar with. The form validates costs for us. Innovate UK don't have access to the JES system to extract information ourselves, which is why this needs to be sent to us. So when your partners have completed their JES forms, academics will need to include their unique reference number on the IFS system and input their figures. Please ensure the figures you provide are identical, and the form then must be uploaded with council status to IFS as a PDF. So running through submitting your application. So this is a summary of the project costs available to all organisations in the project. You will not be able to see any more detailed breakdowns of anyone else's costs. For collaborative applications, IFS will highlight to the lead applicant any partners who have outstanding project finances to complete. All finances must be included in the application before the lead applicant can submit. And it will also check that your research participation costs are within the required limits. So it's important to note that IFS does not validate project costs. It is your responsibility to ensure all costs are within the eligible total project costs as stated in the brief guidance. If you find you need to edit your application once it's been submitted, then this is possible. Firstly, you need to reopen your application. On your IFS dashboard, you will see the option to reopen as shown in the slide. The option to reopen was also visible on your application status page. Once reopened, you can make changes to your application, but when you've finished, please remember to resubmit. Just click on the green Review and Submit button, review your application once more, and then click the final Submit button. So we are able to track site usage and submission uploads. This table shows the number of applicants submitting their proposals each hour leading up to the new deadline. As you can see, the majority of applicants leave it to the final hours. We strongly recommend submitting your application early in good time to avoid any last-minute technical issues. So if you are unsuccessful in this competition, you can use the feedback form the assessors provide to develop your idea and apply into another competition that allows previously submitted applications. If you're successful in this competition, you will be assigned a delivery executive who will guide you through the project setup process. You will have 30 days to complete the project team, project details and bank details, and then you will have 90 days to complete project setup. So during the project setup time, all communication will be through IFS. The lead applicant must provide collaboration agreements and exploitation plans. And any partners with individual total costs of up to 50,000 must provide evidence with a statement of expenditure, and any partners with individual total project costs of above 50,000 must provide evidence with independent accountant reports. All grants are paid quarterly in arrears and only paid following quarterly reporting. Claims can only be made for costs incurred and paid between the project start and end date, and monitoring of the project includes a visit from the appointed monitoring officer. So a little bit about additional support we offer. So Innovate UK Edge, intensive growth and scaling support tailored to the needs of each of our ambitious innovation-driven clients. Offered alongside the project funding to Innovate UK award winners, most of whom engage us. We are also available to all high growth potential innovative small or medium-sized businesses. Engagement at early growth and scaling stages with our core high growth service and enhanced scale-up programme. And it's delivered by 290 innovation and growth specialists embedded in regional ecosystems across the UK, including a board of expert scale-up directors. And innovation and growth specialists or scale-up directors work with a company's leadership to hone its commercial strategy and help it take targeted action to, for example, build investment readiness, manage innovation effectively, enter global markets, provide local to national to international growth and scaling support. Diversity and inclusion is a priority at Innovate UK, and we welcome and encourage applications from people of all backgrounds. We are committed to making our application process accessible to everyone. This includes providing support for people who have a disability or long-term condition and face barriers applying to us. If you would like any support, please contact Customer Support Service on the phone number and email address on the screen. So that brings us to the end of the webinar and an opportunity to answer any questions that have come through during the time that we speak in. If you have any additional questions that you want to add as we're going through, please pop them in the Q&A or chat box, and we'll make our way through them over the next few minutes.
Thanks, Rachel. If we could ask that the questions go into the question and answer box rather than just the chat, that would be great. We've seen an awful lot of engagement, a lot of questions coming through, which is fantastic. But if we could make sure that they're coming through on the Q&A, that will help the team a lot in answering them. So during Rachel's presentation, I did answer a number of questions which came through. So by all means, go through there and review the answers. We'll look at some of what's queued up now and look to answer some of these live. So we've got a question that's top here, which is there a plan for a SuRV follow-on competition? The answer to that is no, not in planning at the moment. The idea is that SuRV is effectively a one-off competition, but should lead to further scale up of your scheme, your technology. So that could be, well, would hope to be a private investment round. You may accompany the SuRV outcomes with a business case that you're already developing or other parallel activity, and from that you're able to then go and successfully attract private funding, or you may look at other grant funding opportunities out there in the landscape. Okay, moving on with another question relating to TRL and MRL, and the question is, as funding percent is tied to industrial research versus experimental development, can you provide definitions for these? Rachel, I think within the Innovate UK website, I think there's some further guidance on this. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We just send you onto the website, take a look through. And if you have any questions following reading that guidance, please contact the customer support team who will be on hand to help out or put you our direction so that we can help you.
So just to give you an indicator, if you're a micro or small organisation for an industrial research project, you can get a maximum grant intervention of 70%. Whereas for experimental development projects, it would be 45%. But the key thing here is to request the minimum amount of grant you need to nudge the needle to make it viable, not to maximise the percentage that you could apply for.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Rachel and Zoe. Moving on then with another question, which is around the briefing pack and webinar. So in terms of the competition briefing pack, that's available now. It's published on the Innovate UK IFS, and you'll also find some information on the apcuk.co.uk website relating to SuRV. In terms of the webinar, as usual, we'll be uploading this webinar, the video of it, up to YouTube, so it's available to all. And again, we'll link that on the APC UK website in the next few days. So I think if you give us probably until the early part of next week, you'll see that appear in the public domain. Okay, so we've another question here regarding the IFS portal. Rachel, this might be one for you. So it looks like only capital usage costs can be inserted at the moment. So that might be one that we need to take away and review offline. Rachel, any thoughts on that?
I would need to go away and have a look and just double check for you. But yeah, leave it with us. If you email into the customer support desk with the full question, they'll send it straight over to myself, and I can get that double checked and get an answer back to you in writing today.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Rachel. Just moving on to the next question then, which is previous grants excluded fuel delivery components, such as filters, PRD and regulators. Not clear from this scope if this has changed. So in terms of the current ATF prioritisation, hydrogen storage as a fuel, as a a net zero or zero tailpipe fuel, it is in scope. And along with that, the sort of ancillary devices for managing that hydrogen and getting it to where it's required would be included, but it would need to be centered around a hydrogen storage technology. Okay, moving on to the next question. Will this cover EV component development support only, or validation tools development support as well? Okay, so yeah, this is about production. So be that of EV components. In terms of validation tools, I'm presuming that means things such as test equipment, which would be out of scope for SuRV. Really, we need to see technologies and schemes and proposals which just need that push to demonstrate that they're ready to scale up, and to demonstrate that to investors. So that's really what we're looking for in SuRV. Okay, so we have another question regarding the Innovate UK finance form. Rachel, do you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, of course.
Joe might be better placed to pick this one up, Rachel, for you. If he's online, is he?
Zoe, yeah. Sorry, what is the question, Rachel?
I'll read it through for you. How is this reconciling the UK finance form? As an example, we might need to spend 300,000 on capital equipment on month one of the project. However, if only depreciation costs can be included in this, would mean we could only claim 30,000 per year, assuming a 10-year depreciation.
So currently, the Innovation Funding Service portal is built on accepting the depreciation of capital assets during project delivery only. Is that something that is not quite correct for this particular competition, Andy? I'm conscious that if we are allowing capital costs that aren't depreciation, then we may need to think about how we capture those from the applications.
Okay, should we take that offline then, and we can review and come back on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Andy.
All right then. So I think that question was posed by Mark Clayton. If you could just drop us an email, Mark, with the question to, if we go to info@apcuk.co.uk, just drop us an email with your contact details. We'll be in touch to answer that question. And to the other applicants, we'll make sure that that's clarified in the brief. Okay, next question then. So do you have a list of approved grant application outsourced writers? APC doesn't store a list of these. To the Innovate team, do you publish anything like this?
No, we don't have a list of approved grant application outsource writers. We wouldn't stop an application from any grant writer. So if you would like to use a grant writer, then we wouldn't stop any specific company from doing that for you. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. We would just like to reiterate that we like your application to have as much character and as much based on your company as it can. So please bear that in mind if you're using an outsourced grant writer.
Okay, that's great. Okay, next question then. So we're currently running a 3-year DER project and anticipate scaling up the outcome. Should we wait until the DER project is completed before applying? Okay, that's interesting actually, because that's around the sort of interplay that's going on in the funding landscape in this area. I see no reason why an application can't be made in parallel, although you've not yet achieved a level of maturity, or you may not have. I don't know about the project really. So it would be about adding credibility to the fact that your proposal is or will be ready for scale up at the point of your SuRV project initiating. So I think that's going to be quite a difficult pitch depending on where your project's at. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Well, I would just to caveat that one though, Andy, is just to make sure that you can't get funded for the same piece of work that you're doing. So there needs to be clear blue water between the funding that you are receiving on DER and the application that you're putting in for SuRV.
Very good point. Okay, the next question then, would activity based in geographic regions which support the UK government levelling up policy be taken into consideration? So in terms of geography, there is a geographical question, which is question 1. It's not actually scored. So this would only really be used for measurement and analysis. There isn't actually any bearing on the outcome in terms of the geography. Okay, moving on then. So what is the maximum ratio of project costs that we can allocate to CapEx? Is 70% acceptable? We don't publish there isn't a limit, within the brief. However, ATF is all about, the big ticket items. We really want to scale up and create this lasting transition for the UK. So generally in successful ATF projects, we will see quite a high CapEx to R&D ratio. Next question then. Can the grant include capital purchases, for example, bespoke equipment for a pilot plant? How would depreciation work in this case, as the equipment would have no sellable value at conclusion of the project, but we would still use the pilot on an ongoing basis? So Zoe, could you support a little bit with this one?
Yeah, I think the requirements here really are around your own internal depreciation plans. Your depreciation policies. So lots of organisations will have an R&D depreciation policy that might write itself down at the end of the project. What you need to be careful of though is that the funding that has been used for the equipment, it cannot have a residual revenue attached to it at the end of the project. So if you are going to use it on an ongoing basis, then that would consider a revenue that you could get post-project. So first thing is to check out your own internal policies in terms of depreciation, and then look to see what the residual value of the equipment that you bought on this project would be. But the best bit is to really get in touch with, as on the email address that Andy said, and the business development team at APC can support you with any of those specific queries.
Yeah, just to add to that, Zoe, the Innovation Funding Service portal does allow capital assets to be fully depreciated during the lifetime of a project. So you can fully depreciate them and the costs would be reflected accordingly. But I think the main point is, as you say, Zoe, to ensure that that there really is in that case no residual value, and that would need to be reflected in your company books and things like that as well.
Okay, great, thanks both. Moving on then, so are internal combustion engine hydrogen innovations in scope? Yes, very much so, but they would need to be to meet the other criteria of SuRV, i.e. the maturity and the fact that they just need this push from SuRV to attract investment. Next question, are the slides available now? The video, as I've already said, will go out on YouTube in the coming days. Does battery material development currently on the APC roadmap? It is. Scale up fit the scope. If that's resulting in critical materials to enter the value chain, yes, that would be in scope. But again, maturity is the critical question, really. You need to be at that stage where you just need that push from SuRV. Next, we have I have the same question as on capital as Mark. can you restate the email we should send the question to? Yes. So we've got some email addresses on screen which you can use. If you want to come to the APC directly, we've a team ready to work with you. So that's info@apcuk.co.uk. So that's info@apcuk.co.uk. Okay, and then the final question for now. So we're working on a technology for hydrogen storage, which would suit this well. It's currently an ATF project. Okay. What would be the best way to find potential partners for this funding? So APC, we're all about collaboration at the end of the day, and we're happy to work with you to help make introductions. So again, get in touch with us. Our business development team's ready to get in, into discussions on that with you. Again, info@apcuk.co.uk. Okay, so there's no other questions in the Q&A list. I would just urge anyone who has an open question in the chat just to please drop that into the Q&A field so that we can address that now. Just give that a couple of minutes. Okay, I've not seen anything else appear in this stream, so I think we'll conclude that now. So thank you very much for your time today, everybody. Really good luck with your applications. We're really looking forward. Sorry, late question here. You said test equipment is out of scope, but is it in scope if it's used as part of the normal production process flow as opposed to design validation? I think a piece of test equipment, even if it's production or end of line test equipment, is going to be a difficult sell for this scope. I think it would have to, I don't think it's going to work within the scope of SuRV. We're looking for scale up of a product or a process. A piece of equipment, to be honest, doesn't really fit with that scope. Can you explain the 3% levy for APC on grants? Yes, I can. There's further information in the competition brief on the 3% levy, but effectively this covers APC and APC's value proposition to the industry. So that's a requirement of APC funding. Okay, we'll give it a moment or two in case we get any more. Okay, I think that concludes things then. So as I said, good luck with your application. Any questions at all, please get in touch. And as I say, good luck with your application. Thank you.